You're listening to another episode of Battles with Bits of Rubber.
So, the subject of today's episode of the podcast is we want to talk about the sort of, I condensed it down to 5, but I'm sure you get it the same. You will get the same questions asked time and again, and I thought it would be worthwhile and of some utility to maybe record an episode discussing these problems in reasonable length, so that when they get asked again, we already have something to refer people to.
Yeah.
So, John will kick us off with the first question.
Sure. Shall we snap our little slate?
Yes, let's do that. That sounds vulgar.
I'm gonna slap my slate at you. Here we go. Ready?
Yes, go.
3, 2, 1, snap.
That must be perfect. I think it was perfect. Excellent. All right.
Question number 1. How do I match an appliance to a person's skin tone?
Yeah, that is a very common question, and it's funny.
And it's a good one.
It is, because the thing is, you'll probably have done this, and we've mentioned this before, where you'll be at a trade show and then, there's someone's got all these amazing makeups in their folio and very extensive, like full body, paint jobs and things. And then, you'll zoom in close on something, you'll see like the fact that the color doesn't match. And they're like, I can't seem to get the skin tone right. And I'm always amazed. I'm like, I think a lot of places encourage people to do big stuff that is, clickbait or, looks good without really getting the fundamentals right. And it astounds me.
That getting those fundamentals right is important. It doesn't matter. You may have done a flawless job applying it with, totally invisible edges, but if the paint doesn't match exposed skin, fail.
It's a tough one.
And admittedly, it's not an easy thing to do, but like anything that we do, the more you do it, the easier it gets. You gotta get the paint color to match the skin tones.
Yeah, I think it's very important to be able to do that. And I just wanted to flag that as a thing that I think is one of those weird things where I've seen, people that are like graduated and they still can't get the color tone right. But that's such a fundamental thing.
It doesn't really matter as much if you're doing if there isn't any exposed skin of the actor visible, because then you paint it however you want it to look. Though it still needs to look like real skin, have that translucency and a sense of depth to it. But if you're just putting a nose on somebody, or a chin, or maybe some cheekbone pieces, matching the skin tones is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, because you've got a lot of real skin right next to the fake skin, and it's obvious if that's not done right. Yeah, you're right. If you can cover somebody, completely, it's often easier in a kind of weird way. But yeah, that is a tough thing. And I think a lot of people will use stuff like maybe latex starting out, which is an excellent material for small things because it costs next to nothing, but it's harder to paint, but that's a good thing to be able to do, I think. And
just because it's naturally opaque.
Yeah, and the old school was like, latex and foam latex, that's what you cut your teeth on. So the silicone business should be pretty straightforward, but people still get that wrong. So I think if you're painting something like foam latex or latex, obviously you're going to be painting with an opaque kind of paint. We delved into this quite deeply on our episode about foam latex, but painting with something like Pax or rubber mask grease, you're going to create something which is quite opaque, but you have to create the illusion of translucency.
Right, and you can thin Pax enough to get a translucent wash, and that's basically how you need to look at painting anything that you're going to be applying, whether it's foam latex, gelatin, silicone, doesn't matter. You want to do layers of transparent washes to build up and get a sense of real translucency that real skin has. Less becomes more. You want to do a little bit at a time, because you can always add more to it if you're not getting enough color. But boy, if you go on too much and that translucency disappears. Got to backpedal, and then you're fixing rather than painting, and you never want to find yourself in that predicament.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's just creeping up on it on that base tone. And one of the things I noticed with foam latex, partly I think because of the amount of light that used to get thrown on it when foam latex was used more, but you always have to paint it a little bit darker than you think. It always seemed to show up on camera brighter than to the eye in a weird kind of way. So you got used to
that's one of the
things.
reasons. Yeah, it's one of the reasons it's so important to have access to the lighting conditions it's going to be shot in or seen in. If you're talking about a theater piece, the lighting in the makeup room is rarely going to be the same as the stage lighting, which can be oftentimes quite dramatic and will completely change the look of the makeup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the light source ends up being a different color. And the light is, I mean, I guess daylight's the best thing. If you could try and get daylight, that's good, or daylight bulbs or, illumination. I've got a couple of dimmable LED panel lights, which are quite good for that.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I have a set of them too, and actually one of them can not only change the intensity of the light, but can change the color temperature.
Yes.
Going from daylight to incandescent, and everything in between, which is really, really nice. It's wasn't very expensive and something I picked up.
No, they're not bad.
When I was in China a couple of years ago.
Well, I mean, mine were from Amazon, but they're probably from China. I think they're made by Newer, NEEWER, and I think they're about. I think you can get them for about 50, 60 quid each. They're about. I don't know.
That's about
8x10 kind of size. But they're plenty bright.
I've got one that's actually a ring light that you can actually mount a camera in the center of it, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I think it's well worth having those things. On the last job I was on, actually, somebody had. I'll show you this little ring light, this little pocket ring light.
Oh yeah,
which is just a little LED battery powered thing, but it was good for just on set stuff.
I can't see.
But that does the same thing. It's different coloured lights, and it's just one of those things that really helps you if you're just trying to do quick touch-ups. But LED, it makes a big difference, those LED lights, because they're not heavy and they don't get hot, so you can mount them in different places. And they're very useful if you end up in a dingy little makeup room and the light's terrible, which it often is. They're great things. But with the base tone, you got to try and get it right, and then you tweak it with washes of red, blue, and yellow. And we've done a couple of podcasts about flesh tones and sort of skin
color. Well, we
did
a whole color theory thing in Prosthetics magazine as well.
We did, yes. But what I will do is I'll put links to those in the show notes, because again, that will be useful to relate to. There's no point in us kind of going on for an hour and a half on that, because we've done an hour and a half on that, but I will put the links to that. Good grief, we're going to need another set of notes. Hang on, I'm just going to write this down. I've been so flat out on the last couple of days, editing like a madman today. It's all sounding very, very cool, though. Yeah, I haven't stopped.
I can't wait to listen to the one that you did with Stu Conran and Dan Fry.
Yes, that one will be.
That's gonna be a killer episode.
So with painting foam latex, there's that method which I've seen, which I quite like, which I've done, which is that I like to paint with that method where you paint a deep red color on the foam first, and this is kind of unique to foam because you want it opaque. You want to just kill off that white. If you've been using white foam, which most people do, because you can pigment the foam. But if it's white foam, you want to put that deep red in first to give it that blood, and then that blood colour that the healthy tissue will have underneath it, and then washes a paler colour over the top.
And you would think, since you're basically covering up that red that you've put down first, that what's the point since you're covering it up with lighter colors? It's amazing what a difference it makes by not doing. And if anybody's interested to want to do a comparison, do a foam piece without laying down that real warm color first, and then do it with. and then do everything else the same, and the difference is palpable.
Wow.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point, and it's a weird quality, isn't it? Because, like you say, you think by covering it with a paint finish, you're not going to see it, but it does have an effect. And also, what's nice is you can not put it so heavily in some areas to get more depth, like the creases and
Sure.
stuff, because everything's painted dark first.
Right.
Those
Even if you model it on, if you kind of blotch it on so that it's not a flat, even application of the color, it makes it more convincing when you add the lighter tones on top of it. It looks more natural.
And you can mix your own PAX paints, which is Liquitex acrylic paints mixed with Prosade or the no-tack Prosade, which you mentioned, which is good. But also the PPI Beta Bond, which I'm a really big fan of. I really like the Beta Bond.
And
Plus.
it smells good too.
It has a weird, almost a bit lavendery.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. I think the Beta Bond is what Tom Supernaut uses as the binder in his PAX paints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really good. He uses pure pigments as well. Well, we discussed that. There's an episode with let me make a note, the Tom Serpenant episode, because he makes beautiful prosthetic paints. Being a painter as well, he knows what's what, and using the pigments as well is great because they're pure pigments. There's a lot more concentrated color in there rather than mixing it just paint, which is pigment plus binder.
And his paints, like the Mel PAX paints, don't change shade when they dry. If you do your own, like I've done my own PAXs, which will work in a pinch. I prefer the commercially made stuff that Tom and Mel have. But acrylic paint typically dries about 2 shades darker than when it's wet. But the Mel PAX and the Supernaut PAX don't change. They're the same wet or dry, which is really nice.
That's a real godsend, isn't it? Because
because you have to factor that in. If you know your paint's gonna change shade when it dries, and there's no real precise way to tell how much when you do it, you're kind of shooting in the dark.
Yes, you got to. Yeah, it's one of those things where you just have to adjust it accordingly. You put it on and then go, yeah, it's too pale. Well, it's too dark. Usually too pale. Now, if you're using something like silicone or gelatin or something, then the color has to be in the base material to begin with.
Right.
And normally the recommendation I feel is to make it the palest color of the skin, so that it is already the highlight color, so that when you want to shade it, it goes darker, but you don't have to apply much highlight or any highlight at all. It is the color of the highlight already. So it's the absence of makeup which makes it pale, which I think is quite nice, because often it can look a little bit sort of hokey, can't it? If it's it depends how dark the skin is, but highlighter on darker skin is less effective than shading on pale skin. It's just the way light works, because it reflects light and it can look like it's sitting on the surface. So it makes sense to make your base tone white. And then, again, the same principle, isn't it? Washes, always thin washes to build up color, like Skin Illustrator or an alcohol palette, which is useful. But also they evaporate much quicker. That's the other thing. When you're dealing with PAX paints, you're often dealing with water as the thinning agent, and to thin it down, and then that doesn't dry as quick as alcohol color. So building up washes is more time consuming with PAX paint, but it's a durable finish. Very good for necks.
Yeah,
and things where there
and
might
I
be a lot
think
of scuffing.
because it's so durable, because you're using an adhesive basically as the binder, it's a good idea to prep the skin before you start painting with some kind of barrier layer, either PPI Top Guard or Krylon's got Pro Shield, and there's Marley Skin, and there are a bunch of different types of barrier layers, because PAX can be a real bitch to get off.
Yes. Yeah.
Even with something that is called a PAX remover.
Yeah.
It's you've got work ahead of you.
What would you say is the best remover you've used? Because that Ben Nye Bond Off is pretty good.
Bond Off is quite good. It's because it's naphtha. It's pure naphtha.
Is that all right as a remover?
And color. I don't. It's you look at the ingredients on the Bond Off, and it just says naphtha, perfume, and color.
Okay.
Well, the only ingredients listed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess read up on the MDMA.
Yeah, Bond Off works really well. The Prozaid remover works pretty well. I make my own remover that's kind of a combination of isopropyl myristate, 244, coconut oil, and a little bit of orange oil for sweet smell, and it works really well.
Fantastic.
But isopropyl myristate by itself is a terrific remover. Coconut oil by itself is a terrific adhesive remover.
Mm-hmm.
The best way, and Tom, I think Tom Supernaut did a tutorial on this in a back issue of Makeup Artist magazine some time ago, using one of the things about removers, I think everybody is in too much of a hurry when they're putting it on to get the piece off. They don't let it sit and work its way into the adhesive,
Mm-hmm.
making it much easier to get off. They just think it's going to come off as soon as it instantly touches the adhesive, which is rarely the case.
Yeah,
so
it
let
needs to break
the
it down.
adhesive remover do its job to break down the adhesive, and then take damp towels as hot as you or your actor can stand it, and basically do a facial. Lay that on the face and let the wet heat help also. So if you can get most of it off and there's still some sticky residue, have your actor jump in a hot shower and hot soapy water. That's going to get the rest of it off pretty quick, especially if you've used a barrier layer beforehand.
Mm. That's really good.
That helps. That helps a lot with getting the adhesive off.
There's also, I've noticed, I do have some remover wipes, which I know Mold Life did some called Life Wipes. I think Neil's Materials have got something, some kind of remover wipe, and they're just like individual sachet wipes with the remover in them, which is really handy to give to the actor to say, if we missed a spot, if you find something like, rather than having to decant out a small bottle of it and give it to them, something that could spill or leak, you can just give them the little sachets, and they're quite handy to remove, which is quite cool.
Yeah, because you're invariably going to find a little booger of something behind an ear or someplace. You think you get everything off, and
you stuck to your pillow in the morning. Whatever you've been doing, I don't know. But it tends to reveal itself the following day, covered in lint from the bed.
And barrier layers are good for another reason too. I talked about it in my book. We were doing a production of The Wiz. Did I tell you the story?
No.
Do you remember it? We were going to have our actor who was playing the Cowardly Lion. We had full facial prosthetic pieces that were really, really cool, very stylized, kind of modeled after the lion in Madagascar. And then he was going to have this big fur suit and mane and all this stuff. So when we were doing some makeup tests, when we were just starting tech rehearsals, we were putting them on. We were using Telesis to glue these foam pieces down. And boom, we were using Super Solve to get them off, and everything went on beautifully, came off beautifully. And he was in and out, maybe 15 minutes to remove and get his skin all cleaned up. It was perfect. Well, then when we got to full dress with the prosthetics and the fur suit, and he came in after that first night of rehearsing in the suit, fucking makeup wouldn't come off. We used every remover we had.
Yes, I do remember this now.
It wouldn't come off. I'm going, fuck me. I'm flop sweating. It was, and the actor's sightless. He was blind from birth because it's a disabled theater company. Everybody in the company has a physical disability of some kind. And he's going, what the hell's going on? It wouldn't come off. And it was by the time we finally got it off, which should have taken us 20 minutes tops, took about an hour.
Wow.
To remove this stuff from his face. And it was too late for me to call PPI and say, what the hell's going on here? And I called Eric Heinley the first thing in the next morning. First thing, as soon as I told him the situation, the first thing he said was, does he drink? And I went, yeah, but it's not like he's a drunk. He said, it doesn't matter. It's, any alcohol in the system, and he likes to have a beer or a glass of wine when he gets home from work.
Yeah.
Any alcohol in the system, when it sweats out of your body, can do one of two things. It can either make the adhesive come loose and your prosthetics will just fall off, or do what it did for us, which won't come off. So he overnighted me some of their Top Guard, and we used that as the barrier layer. So we'd condition his skin. We'd, astringent his skin, put the Top Guard on, then we'd glue the piece on.
Yeah.
Came off so fine. So, boom.
That's really good. I mean, I've used Top Guard.
Use a barrier layer anyway.
That's really good. I mean, I've used Top Guard before, as an adhesive promoter, to stop sweat attacking.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like top lips or somewhere where there's a lot of movement and you're worried, you put that down on the skin first and then the glue on top, having already used something like Kiehl's astringent or something to clean the skin. But I never really think about it as, in addition to that, it also makes it easier to get it off as well as promote the glue. So you get a better sticking, better join, but also it comes off better, which is a nice thing. Because at the end of the day, when you're at your most tired, even though it's an extra cost and more trouble to have to put down another layer, you really see. That's the thing about like Prosade. I think Prosade is cheaper, it's a very cheap glue, so a lot of people will have used it, but it's actually a real swine to get off. So I'd rather.
It was originally developed as a bumper sticker adhesive. Have you ever tried to get a bumper sticker off your car? It's like, son of a bitch, this thing won't come off. That's Prosade.
So we'll put some of the links to specifically to painting, because we already have some extensive painting stuff, but that we've mentioned. But basically, it comes down to creeping up on the right color, but get the base tone right to begin with, and then tweaking it with washes of successive washes of color to creep up on it, and then blend it out so that you get a nice graduation. So there's no sudden stopping point between the piece and the skin. You want to taper it off. Question 2. How do I ensure a good edge on an appliance? And that's in the same ballpark as question number 1. That's a real fundamental question, but actually it's a very, very good question. And we've all suffered, the consequences of having not done that.
Well, the quick, easy answer is sculpt it right to begin with.
Yes. Yeah. The reason I thought this was a good question to point out, because I've had a few people in the last couple of weeks actually have asked, like, what magical substance do you put on to make your edges disappear? As if it's like the job of something retrospectively to make the edges go away. And it's like, when you see a good edge, that's not the result of something just being dumped on there. It's because everything's been crafted beautifully from step to, you're not, what's the word? You're not owed a good edge. Good edges come from, the result of everything going right.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. But if some people just think, well, I did the thing and the edge should be fine. It's like, well, no, you've got to really, if the finer an edge, the harder it is to maintain. You do have to make sure that, you're, we did a whole blog post just on edges, which again, I'll put the link to that in here, but, into the show notes here. But basically, feather thin edges are desirable to have, but they're easy to damage. And it's kind of like the analogy I used was creating good edges is like personal hygiene. If you do it properly, it goes unnoticed. People only notice when you stop washing. No one ever says to you, "Thank you for not smelling." But they notice when if you don't brush your teeth for a month, you'll see the difference. So if you do a good job of blending in edges, very often people won't know that they're there, and you'll have seen it where people point at the wound and go, "Oh, that's really great." And you're like, "But what about, the wound that's 2 inches long? But what about the 18 inches of appliance that has blended flawlessly into the skin that they didn't notice?" That's where most of your work went. So yeah, but there's no magical fluid. I mean, there are fillers. You can put fillers and stuff to fix a bust edge, but the idea is to try and get a good edge in the manufacture of it.
And there is a magic elixir of sorts. A bunch of people use it. I first learned of it from Mike Spatola. And it's when sometimes, you get less than perfect edges with foam latex, especially if you're, using pre-purchased pieces and you're trying to fit something on somebody that it wasn't sculpted for. A mixture of, and you know how I hate spirit gum, but it does have its uses. And one of them is with foam latex edges. So if you've got a less than ideal edge where, maybe there's been a tear and it's an okay edge, but not ideal, mixture of spirit gum, 50-50 mixture of spirit gum and 99% alcohol. If you brush that over that noticeable edge, as long as it's not, really an obnoxious edge, it'll soak into the foam, because foam's basically a sponge. And it'll kind of, as the alcohol evaporates and the spirit gum dries, it shrinks down that edge to nothing. So you can make some absolutely invisible edges with this stuff. You got to be a little bit careful, just because spirit gum isn't real flexible when it's dry.
But it's better than the shitty edge you would otherwise have had, I guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But you can definitely improve a shitty
good.
edge with this. But you can't go into any of this stuff with the "we'll fix it in post" attitude. You want to try to do it right to begin with, and not, well, it's this isn't that good. We'll fix it with Bondo or the alcohol and spirit gum.
Yeah, it's just
whatever
sloppy,
you're
isn't
using
it?
to patch stuff, and it's not the right mindset.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that you can't fix edges if they go wrong, but it's a thought of relegating good craftsmanship from the outset because you're just thinking, well, I'll just double a bunch of filler on it. It's like, that's really not. It's not good enough. But yeah, you want to sculpt your edges nice and thin. Your molds have to be accurate as well, because if your molds don't close properly, that's often what can happen, and that's when you get inconsistencies with.
Yeah, the sculpture could be beautiful, but the mold's fucked up.
Yeah, if your mold's
then you're going to
warped
have a
or
really
something.
thick edge.
Yeah, and if your mold's warped, you could run a piece, and then it might be that every piece you run is wrong in the same places at this, to the same amount, in which case the mold is warped. Or it might be that, you run 10 pieces and 3 of them have got bad edges, but the other 7 are fine, in which case, well, that's down to how you've closed the mold then, because, it's one of those things. And there are certain things you can do sometimes. I mean, the more accurate molds, like, a good epoxy or something, they cost more money, and that's one of the reasons why, because the accuracy they give you is phenomenal. But it's one of those things with, like, that's why flat molds are so good, because flat molds you can get flawless edges on them pretty much every time, because you can see the edges. There's a limit to what you can do with a flat mold, but you can do quite a lot with a flat mold. One thing you can do with a flat mold, and just like anything else, if you're going to go sticking on pieces and that a bad edge is something that might happen, is to in advance make some little patches of Pro Bondo pieces, little blenders, and some silicone pieces, and just little patches of cat plastic, just offcuts of cat plastic. Keep those handy, and you can glue those over the edge as a real last resort if you need to.
That's a great idea. Keep those in your kit.
Yeah, I mean, spend some time making some, little, kidney bean shapes, little straight runs, circles, L shapes, whatever, conceivable, 5 or 6 different shapes, about the size of a fingertip.
But they need to be thin. You don't want to make these too thick, because then you're changing the makeup.
Yes, and then your bad edge is now replaced with the obvious bulge, which is no improvement really. But yeah, it's a subtle thing. You can also fill it with if you've got a bad edge, so long as you secure it first, you can fill it with some filler like a prosade cream or some thickened prosade or Pro Bond or PTM, the prosthetic transfer material. That would work. But there's a limit to how much thickness you can fill with that, because it evaporates. So if you're filling half an inch with this stuff, you're going to be there for a week with your hair dryer drying it out.
Take forever to dry.
Yeah, so that's no good. So you want to try and make it as nice as you can. The other thing with foam, and you can sort of do it with silicone, but it works really well with foam, is really, really bad edges. I just snip away from the back with a pair of scissors, a pair of curved nail scissors, and then try and reduce the thickness from the back. And then when you stick it on, then you can maybe fill it afterwards. But try and get it down as much as you can.
Careful not to cut your fingers.
Yeah, that would be bad. And then you're back to square one, like bleeding all over your foam.
But you also want to, if you're filling up, if you're covering a bad edge with thickened prosade, you want to build up to the edge rather than going from the edge down onto the skin.
Yeah, you don't want to add thickness.
And you want to do a little bit at a time, let it dry, and if you need to add more, do it that way. Don't try to go all in at once, because it'll just take forever to dry, and if your actor happens to move, that it's before you've had a chance to powder something, and it sticks to itself, and then your problems just start to cascade.
Yeah, it make a big gummy mess, which is not ideal. I mean, you can sort of fix it a bit with silicone as well. Like if it's a silicone piece, you could mix it up something like third degree or sculpt gel. But we did a whole big blog post just about edges. Again, I'll put the links to that here, and also a video about repairing dodgy edges, because that's something I think is very good to see, and I've not seen somebody do that, where basically I took a piece, completely ruined it, stuck it on badly, and then showed you how I fixed it. So that was in the magazine, but we also did a video, and I'll put the link to that video and that blog post in these notes.
And it's a skill you need to have in your toolkit, because if you're on set and you've got a crappy edge that needs to get fixed, it needs to get fixed. The director doesn't care. The first AD is not gonna give a shit. They're shooting that scene in 5 minutes, and
it's quite a motivator.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to stress, I spend most of my time in the workshop is fine. Most of my time on set, I'm either panicking about what could go wrong, or I'm relieved that it didn't go wrong. That's basically the frame of mind. So if there's a little bit of fear when you're doing this stuff,
so get used to those feelings.
Yeah, that is correct.
It's not unique to you, Stuart.
No, it's one of those feelings.
No,
so there we go.
I'm always oh shit, are they going to find out what a fraud I am?
It's a terrifying feeling, yeah, that imposter syndrome. But you just got to, I think if you're crippled and paralyzed by that feeling, that's not good. But I think it's probably reasonably healthy to have a certain amount of, not skepticism of your own abilities, but you don't just assume it's all just going to go to plan. It goes to plan because you're paying attention to it, not like, I can, relax a little bit because it's going to be fine, because that's normally when the wheels fall off the cart.
Well, there's no such thing as being over-prepared.
No, it does pay to keep on top of those things. All right, question 3. Do you want to do question 3?
Yeah. How can I create good work without spending a fortune on materials?
See, that's a good thing, because you want to build up a folio, and maybe you're at a college where, they haven't got facilities to use everything that you've read about and seen, like, fiberglass and stuff, and it's all pretty stinky, so it needs extraction. There's an increasing amount, I've noticed, of colleges that they've expanded the courses that they want to deliver, but they don't necessarily spend the money they should up front making it safe to do that. So they'll do a course around it, but they'll limit what materials you can use. And I understand that, but it's just, it can be disappointing if you suddenly find out all these materials that you feel like you should be using, but you can't afford to, or the place you're at doesn't do that. But that doesn't
you're
mean...
rarely going to find epoxy molds making materials in a course. You'll probably be doing plaster and hydrocal and ultracal molds. So on one hand, it takes money to make money, but on the other hand, there are ways and materials you can use that aren't going to break the bank.
Yeah, and also I would say I don't think you have any business making molds out of epoxy until you've done your sort of apprenticeship on plaster molds, because regardless of the materials,
not what you want to make mistakes on.
No, but there are some basic rules about mold making regardless of the material. So it makes sense to, start with cheaper material. I say cheaper materials. It's one of the plaster is one of the base materials you should know about anyway, and everything you learn in plaster. Plus, you can combine epoxy and plaster, and you look at Rob Freitas's Instagram page. He'll occasionally throw up a plaster mold that he's working on, and it's still something that keeps coming back, because you don't always need or you don't always have the budget, or maybe it's a one-off and you don't. Do you know what I mean? It's plaster keeps cropping up, so it makes sense to be able to do that. So, you can still do very good work with cheap materials. That the expensive material doesn't make it a good job. You can still do a shit job with expensive materials.
Absolutely, and that's when it can get really expensive if you make a mistake. If you lock up your mold, rigid to rigid is where undercuts really come into play. And if you aren't paying attention, and if you've, a half a millimeter of an undercut on a rigid mold to a rigid core is enough to lock up a mold so that it will never come apart or completely break everything when you force it apart. And then it becomes a real expensive mistake because you've got to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And if you're using less expensive materials to learn those lessons, then you can you can live to mold another day.
Yeah, and most learner drivers don't have their first lesson in a McLaren F1 sports car. There's a good reason why you don't do that. Aside from the fact it probably drives like a bag of shit if you've never driven before, but it's just you don't want to find out that you got a slippy clutch foot in traffic in a $200,000 sports car. So that's not good. But yeah, I think the materials that are used on skin, they're all very expensive. Things like glues and stuff, you kind of can't avoid using some expensive materials, but you don't always have to use expensive materials. I think the thing is, the thing you've got to remember is you want to display your competence through what you can do. So if you don't have a lot of money for materials, then you instead have to do very good work with some basic things. And in episode, I think 51, was it the episode where we chatted to Neil? We came up with 3 good ways of doing something for not a lot of money. So it's worth, thinking about what I do a more complicated thing, or if I get this expensive material, I'll do. Because I've seen, and we've all seen, you can tell whether somebody's doing good work with what they've got. It doesn't make it a better job because it's a more expensive material. So
no, old school materials work really well. If you're learning, we've nose and scar wax. If you're learning, and it's not going to be for something that's in a going on a high traffic area of the body, nose and scar wax is a great material to learn how to get edges working right, building up directly on the skin. Latex and cotton you can get really good results with it.
Yeah. Well, we've seen recently.
It's not going to be a substitute for silicone or any of the other high-end prosthetic materials, but frickin' Jack Pierce, who did the Wolfman and Frankenstein, right? He built up Boris Karloff's Frankenstein makeup from scratch every day using cotton and rigid collodion.
Yeah, and it worked beautifully.
And it looked great.
Yeah, and have you seen more recently, some of Rick Baker's stuff? He's been, there was a while ago where he was playing with some wool and cotton and latex, and, modeling stuff up, and he made that beautiful Nosferatu head in paper mache. I mean, it's like, it doesn't need to be an expensive. It's literally, that's a very good example of seeing someone showing how what they know can be displayed, with anything. You can give them a mashed potato and a fork, or sculpted into something fantastic. So, I wouldn't recommend taking that into an interview, but you might want to take a photo of it if you do a good job.
Sure.
But it's about doing good things like that. One thing I think is that a lot of people get hung up on is like if they can't do a makeup from start to finish, then they just won't do any of it, and that's a real tragedy. If no one's hiring you to do a job, then you won't be generating makeup. So I think what would be good would be to have some life casts on standby, and I think that's a good thing to aim to anyways, to have a bunch of copies of life casts kicking around. Even if you have to take them or buy them or something, just so you have some life casts. But you can, sculpt in a life cast, paint it, rip all that off, and then, do it again. So you can make the thing look like a finished head, even though it's not been molded and cast, but you can display. And we used to do that, for designs and stuff, where you'd sculpt up, you cast up like 5 or 6 plaster faces, sculpt up 5 or 6 different noses on them, paint them to be like the skin, and then you could show the producer, 5 copies of something that were physical, and they could look at, and nothing was molded. It was just to show the shape, and then if something was approved, then you could reproduce it and sculpt it again, and then you would sink your time into molding it and casting it. But it's just a good way of producing something. And if you stipple it with latex, you sculpt onto the live cast with your plastiline, whatever it is you're going to be, and then stipple the whole thing, the sculpt and the core, with a couple of layers of latex on a sponge, let it dry, and then paint it. And then when you're done, you can just peel that latex off and then reuse everything.
Yeah, that's a great one.
And it says we did something similar with again, I'll put links to this in the show notes of video of me. I did a reptile skin, and instead of latex I sprayed it with cat plastic, but you could use latex in the same way, and it just meant again, not a lot of money, but it gives you a good chance to do something decent. But sculpting something or photographing it or sketching something, even a pencil sketch, it just gives you an opportunity to reveal what you're capable of at the very least.
And it's a good way to also just to hone your painting chops.
Yes, yeah. I think it's good to kind of keep your hand in, and you know this yourself. When there isn't any work going on, most people I know who work will still just do stuff for fun, because they just want to keep their chops up. They just want to keep their hand in. So, and also it just feels wrong to not do that. Like athletes who aren't competing, they still train, they still use their bodies every day, because you're not going to be winning anything in 6 months from now if you sit on the sofa the whole time. So, although that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment, but then I'm not entering any competition. So
no, you're drawing. You're getting your drawing chops back. I've seen what you've been posting, playing with your little tablet.
Yeah, I'm having fun with that. It's awesome. Yeah, it's very cool. It's not an iPad, but it's not bad. It was like I said, about 450 quid, but it's brilliant. Infinite Painter is what I've been using, and it seems very similar.
I think when we're done recording today, I think I'm gonna get my iPad out and start getting back to Procreate and see if I can't figure out how to make that software work for me.
Question 4. Very good question. How do I get work?
Get born into it.
Marry into it. I started this by saying, look, the internet has democratized many things, which before excluded a lot of people by limiting access. Like anything of value, normally the value derives from the fact that it's rare. Okay, so there's usually some kind of gatekeeper, whether it's a publisher, record producer, or an agent. They're normally the thing that sit between you, the enthusiastic individual, and your published book or your best-selling record or whatever it is you want to do. And so obviously desperate for favor, to stand out from the crowd, people would vie for individual attention in the best way they know how. And you'll see that online where people humiliate themselves just to get eyeballs,
Yeah, no, it doesn't hurt to be willing to humiliate yourself, or learn to adapt.
Yeah.
Improvise, overcome.
Yeah. Well, I think the trouble is now that everything's been blown open by the internet. I mean, certainly with regards to books, writing, the amount of people that must, write erotic fiction, they publish it on a Kindle because they can, it's a massive Kindle area. Because I was looking into the whole publishing thing, and it was interesting to see the growth in different genres and which of those, the self-publishing world has kind of gone into. And it's interesting from an editor's point of view. Like if you're a publisher, you can just sit back and look at the self-published books that are doing well, and then
maybe we should take a shot at erotica.
The erotica. Have you seen? There's a podcast called "My Dad Wrote a Porno." Have you heard of that?
I have heard of it. I haven't listened to it.
You must listen to it.
But it sounds like it would be hilarious.
It is very funny. It's very funny. I mean, I wouldn't eat or drink while you're listening. Not because it is disgusting, but just because you will spit whatever you've got in your mouth out when you laugh, because there's some very, very funny things. It's hilarious. But so there was always a process that you'd have to sort of follow to get stuff done. And the internet has kind of changed all that. And, now if you want to produce something, there's no real reason to stop you from doing it, because you have if you have a laptop, you pretty much have all the tools that, were not available to most people. But that also means there's a lot of crap out there. That's the trouble. And, it's difficult if everyone's doing something, it's difficult to stand out. So how do you get work is the bottom line is you do good work and you show that to the right people. But the trouble is so many people are doing pretty good work and some not, but it just means the in trays of companies are filling up in a way that they weren't 20 years ago, because there wasn't a face off, there wasn't a glow up, there wasn't a popular channel that was promoting it. I'm not saying I am saying it's a bad thing. Very well my position on those things, but what I'm saying is that just means that you got to know that your CV is one of 50, whereas 20 years ago it was one of 5, so it's much less likely to get noticed. So
I think it's an area where you have to be the one who's willing to go the extra mile to do what most other people will be unwilling to do. It's about persistence and determination and that stick-to-itiveness where you aren't going to give up. Never surrender. It's the ability to follow up and follow through with something. If somebody looks at your folio and says, this is not bad, but what if you were to do this, this, and this to improve your work? Well, if you don't do anything about that, you're going to be like most everybody else. So most people fail because they aren't willing to follow up and follow through. If you come back to show your folio again, say, okay, I did what you suggested. I made these improvements, these changes. What do you think of it now? Mm-hmm. Well, that's gonna. You can't buy that. That's the kind of stuff that somebody's gonna say, oh yeah, this kid's got something. Yeah. And the next time they've got an opening, whether it's to come in and sweep the floor, something to get your foot in the door, boom, they're going to call you instead of these other yahoos that didn't do what was suggested.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because it's like, in a weird way, I mean, there are certain things you have to do that are right and proper, in that, there's certain conduct and sort of the way you behave is important. But in terms of like sheer ability and talent, you kind of either have it or you don't. Do you know what I mean? Like you can see, like when you're looking at, I was watching Chet Zara Like to Pay Monsters documentary. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't.
And it's like, he's amazing stuff, but he was doing pretty good stuff, when he was a little kid, and his stuff was better than most of his, kids his age. So it's one of those things where, you'll know it because you have seen it yourself when you watch somebody who's, holy shit, they just like, they're not human almost. It's like there's something about them that's just not like everybody else. That's why they're here. And it's almost like you can't manufacture that. So you've got to, in order to get work, you do have to be seen, and your work has to be good. You need to be good because, there's a lot of good people out there. So if you're not as good as the good people, or you're not likely to get, it's hard to say. You're not going to be fantastic out the gate, because if you start at a company, you're not going to be better than, if you started at Spectral Motion, you are not going to be a better sculptor than Norman Cabrera. Do you know what I mean? You're not. Yeah. And the chances are, if they've hired you on your first day, you won't be supervising him. Do you know what I mean? You're going to be quite lower down in the pecking order. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're going to get given some kind of massively responsible position off the bat. But there are good people who are, we've known, who are probably not going to get work because they're abrasive or they're big-headed or they're not very nice, or do you know what I mean? So talent isn't everything. Yeah. You've got to be able to get on with other people as well. But you can kind of tell when you meet people who are just like, holy shit, your stuff is outstanding. And you can only improve what you can improve, but you also have to understand, if you've got 50 people who are really, really good, out of those 50 people that are really, really good, some of them are going to be like the best out of that, and you might not be that good. Do you know what I mean? You just can't. Mm-hmm. And going to Monster Palooza was like that. You'd see so many good things. Your eyes would roll out of your head because you're like, holy shit, like I should just cut my hands off. Looking at Zebra Central, it's like, holy shit, this stuff's amazing. people here who presumably not all of them are being paid as sculptors. They're just doing it at the weekend. You know, it's like there's so much good talent, but you got to be that. You don't necessarily have
It's
to.
not just the talent; it's the imagination.
It's the imagination, but it's being able to
well.
do it. It's the ability to be able to do it in the industrial environment in a time limit with this group of people for this money. You know, to a specification. It's being able to work under those conditions, and that's what you don't get from just looking at good sculptors. You actually need to know how they function within the environment, and then not everyone can do that. There are people who are really good sculptors if you don't rush them, you know, or if you don't put any pressure on them. But if they've got to do something again because the client didn't like it, and it's like, oh shit, you know, and the guy goes to pieces because they didn't like what I did, you know. That's why I like Don Lanning's got such a great attitude, you know, about if he sculpts something, it's like, this is not my work. I'm doing it, but for them, this is their sculpt. Mm-hmm. They get to decide what they want. And if the client makes a change, then I'll happily do it. And I'm not, you know, my well-being is not attached to the sculpt. If they want it,
and that's hard for
change.
some people to accept, because even if it's something that they're sculpting for a client, for somebody else, part of them is going into that sculpture and getting negative criticism about it.
It's hard to take that.
It's hard to not take that personally, even though you're not doing what they asked you to do and you're getting dressed down for it. So suck it up, Nancy. Gotta make it right.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think I was stuttering like an idiot all those over. What I was trying to say is that you know you've got to be as good as you can be, but you can improve. Whatever you are, you can improve. And if you've got 20 people improving, some are going to improve more than others, and you can only improve as much as you can. You can't know how good everyone's going to be. You can only be what you can be. And so your job is to be the best version of yourself as you can.
Yeah, don't try to compare yourself to other people.
No, exactly right.
That's all that's going to do is make you start seeing a psychiatrist.
Yeah, what you should do is compare yourself to how you were yesterday. Don't compare yourself to how somebody else is today, and be the best that you can be. I mean, the thing is as well, I mean, I'm doing this with the drawing. I'm not going to get work as an artist, but there's something I get out of the act of out of drawing or sculpting something for fun that goes beyond just the drawing. Do you know what I mean? It's an exercise. It's a practice. The whole thing is a practice. It's what you sort of do in order to maintain, your connection with how you observe. And as we all know, like sculpting and drawing is about observing.
Comes back around to us being artists. So we do what we do because we can't not do it.
Yeah, it hurts to avoid.
It's something that's just part of us. There's Agnes DeMille and wrote a letter to I can't think of her name now, but it's basically you don't judge your work. You just have to keep doing it. You're never going to be satisfied with your work. Your work's never going to be good enough, and that's okay.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean you stop trying.
No, your expectations grow with your abilities. So it's always just a little bit ahead of where you are. What you want to be is always a little bit further. No matter how good you are, you'll just kick your expectations along with you and keep working outside your comfort zone until it gets comfortable, and then push yourself outside your comfort zone again. That's the only way you're going to get better at anything. Yeah. One of the things I think is very important is to understand that the film industry as an entity is a massively varied place to work, and the unique demands of it, they're not for everybody. But within that, there's so many jobs in it. And if it's always been the case, if you wanted to get paid work, if you wanted to make working on films and stuff the major source of your income, it's always been hard to do in makeup effects and prosthetics. Mm-hmm. But honestly, the amount of prosthetics being made nowadays is, it can be quite high on big jobs. And you will get big jobs and big productions, not all the time, but stuff like Star Wars around for like 4 years, 5 years, you know. And even if you don't get on those jobs, the point is, what I've done over the last few years is do quite well out of the other jobs that couldn't get done because those jobs were being filled by, the
Yeah.
vast majority of the industry. So,
Oh, yeah.
I did all right with the smaller jobs. So it can still benefit you even if you don't get on them.
Well, I came very close to spending 18 months in New Zealand doing prosthetics for the second season of Spartacus for Stars.
Oh, wow.
Because there wasn't anybody available. Jane O'Kane, who had been the prosthetic supervisor for the first series of Spartacus, was getting ready to go on maternity leave, and she was having trouble finding a replacement because everybody was working on The Hobbit.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
everybody was working on The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And Tammy Lane recommended me to Jane, and it came down to me and an Australian makeup artist to do the series. And, by law, they have to hire locally unless they can't find anybody at all, which is why they wound up coming to me. And this other guy, I can't think of his name because I'm getting old, was able to juggle his schedule around to make it work. So they wound up hiring him. But I was incredibly flattered that I even got considered for figuring out how to kill people in Spartacus.
That's amazing.
That'd
have been a nice run.
Would have been a fun gig.
Wow. That would have been away from home for a while.
But I would have been away from home for quite a while. So may have dodged a bullet.
Maybe, but it's nice to
Yeah.
to have come close, I guess. So, to get work in a studio, I think it's really important that you understand what the studio does, because there's different kind of jobs, and I think you have to get familiar with the processes of the kind of work involved in them, because if I've seen it not often, but you do see it on places where people are studying at a college or something, the subject they think they want to get into without really knowing any of the jobs or the people in the jobs, or you know what I mean. They couldn't list, like if they wanted to be sculptors, they couldn't tell me 5 sculptors.
Yeah, well,
do you know
the
what I mean?
machinery is huge. Yeah. So if you go to the theater to watch a movie, when the credits start to roll, don't get up and leave with everybody else. Stick around and watch the credits.
Yeah.
Because this is going to give you at least a partial list of the people whose job you want.
Yeah, take a pen and paper.
Who you want to work with,
note them down.
Stick around. But these are the people you want to emulate. And chances are, they're all on Instagram or Facebook, and
or look them up on IMDb and just look into what they've done.
Look them up and find out who they are. You got to know who the players are.
Yeah, definitely. I think you have to know what jobs are and who's doing them already, because at the end of the day, people pay to have their problems solved. That's what we all do. So the trick is to find out whose problems you could solve, and find out where people are already spending money, and try and get in front of that stream of money. So where if prosthetics are being made, who is making them and for what, and then if that's where you need to be. So I think step 1 is to assemble a good portfolio. And I would say one little tip is I think it's obviously worth make a digital copy, so you got one on your iPad, but also a hard copy, a printed copy, because the people who make stuff, not all of them want this, but people who make stuff like to hold stuff in their hands. They're understandably tactile people, and they like a book they can turn.
Neil's real vocal about that. He wants to look at a physical copy of somebody's portfolio rather than flip through pages on somebody's iPad or, God forbid, on their phone.
Yes. Yeah. Make it a nice, decent, A4 10 by 8 kind of image, definitely. But yeah, I think that hard copies are nice. Make sure it's your best work, and don't show a portfolio that's only gore.
No, for the love of God. Gore is not a career choice unless you want to be a serial killer. It's gonna just pigeonhole you into the haunted attraction market.
Yeah.
Halloween. Gore's fun to do. Don't get me wrong.
But if it's the only thing you can do,
but it's the only thing you can do,
you're a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, gore is one of those things that is fun to do, like you say, and it can be done badly. But it's just, if the only thing you've got evidence of is gore, it just looks like you're limited to things you can cover in blood. Because I think if you saw a beautiful age maker, you'd assume from that people can definitely do gore, because it requires more skill to do those things. So, so you're much better off doing those things.
Well, it used to be doing bald caps was one of the requirements when they still were doing testing to get into the union. Being able to do a bald cap was
Yeah.
was one of the tests you had to do. So, bald caps may not seem like a glamorous thing to have in your portfolio, but they're not easy
No,
to do
they're
well.
not. And they're proper grown-up makeup. And that's the thing. If the thought of doing a ball cap doesn't excite you because it doesn't seem challenging enough, or the challenge is the one you would like to do, I think you kind of need to grow up a bit, because you have to understand that's the sort of stuff that, like you say, really shows off. Because it's hard to do well, and the people who are looking
Yeah.
at stuff in a folio know that. So if they see a folio full of things that they know are hard to do, that's more impressive to them than the thousands of folios they will see full of stuff that's easy to do. That's the point, really. It's the lowest hanging fruit. To smother something in blood is what, is the last resort kind of thing. So it might be that it's a good makeup, but if it's covered in blood, it could be that you just screwed it up and you're hiding from it. So, and if you do gore stuff, like if you have some gore stuff in there, it's good if you can put, if you've got like a wound or something that you've done as a makeup, I think it's worth having that painted up with the skin colors first, and take a photo before you put any blood on, and then show it
Yeah.
bloodied, so you can display, oh look, my edges were great before I put blood on.
Yeah, well,
just
no,
to show
that's
that.
another good point too. Is you don't want to show screen grabs of your finished makeup in the dramatic mood lighting of the set where it was being shot or on stage. You want to see really well lit, high resolution images of the makeup in good lighting, so you can see how good the edges are, whether the cheek pieces line up symmetrically, if the nose is crooked. You want to see the makeup well. It's okay to have that finished makeup in the screen version too,
Yeah.
but somebody's going to be hiring you based on what your makeup looks like in good lighting, not hidden in shadows and low light.
Yeah, I think, like you say, like nice clear images that display, because basically they're just trying to show people who are looking for faults in pieces. You're trying to show them how well you can do something, so that you can reveal your ability to them. And if you take one or two, I mean, take a bunch of photos obviously, but narrow it down to like one or two clear pictures, because there's nothing more annoying than seeing like 50 photos of the same makeup from slightly different angles. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
if you're on a date and someone comes out with a one-liner and they're repulsive, if they come up with another 50 one-liners, it's not going to help. It just makes it look worse. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, just pick one or two good pictures, and that's it. If there's good stuff in it, it's obvious in those one or two pictures. Having more of the bad pictures doesn't mean that it makes it better. So
Yeah, you could have an extreme close up showing how flawless an edge is, in addition to a full face shot of the makeup. But you don't want to have ultra close ups of every facet of that makeup.
no,
when,
I think if
just one example of how good the edges are is more than sufficient.
yeah, I mean, I think it might be worth having a nice clean folio that's limited to like one good tactic I think is to have, like, you open the spread, you've got a 2-page spread, so the left hand page is blank, the right hand page that you're looking at has a full size picture of the finished makeup, and then when you turn the page, there's a double page spread, and on that you have maybe 4 or 5 making of photos that are big enough and interesting enough to sort of show the process, show your competence. You might have one of the sculpt, one of the mold, one of the cast, one of it applied before paint. But also what you do is you maybe have more of the photos with you in a separate pouch. So if somebody asks, oh, have you got any more shots of that? Then you can show them more. So you can go deep
Absolutely.
dive, but don't show 400 photos because you took 400 photos of everything you did, because you just fatigue whoever's watching it.
But you brought a point that makes me think sometimes it's a good idea to have more than one portfolio. You don't want to go in to interview for a job as a mold maker and all you've got is character makeup pictures and few, if not none, no mold pictures. You don't want to go in to get an interview for a gig where you're going to be sculpting an age makeup and all you've got is pictures of dragon people.
Yes, because this doesn't show them what they want to
make
see.
sure make sure you have what you're going in to get a job for.
And that's a good point as well. Bouncing off of that is, making sure that there's a variety of things in your folio, as much of it as you can realistic. Creatures and stuff are good, but keeping it grounded, I think, on real, so you don't have to cover someone head to toe, because I think there are certain limits that you'll be presented with, like the distance between the eyes and the mouth and stuff. There's only so many times you can change everything but those things. You know what I mean? It's just, it looks too much. So just a nice age makeup, a nice ball cap, a nice couple of characters where you maybe take one person and make them look like 3 different people in 3 different makeups. Nothing drastic. Don't turn them into like massive witches with 15-inch long noses and chins. That looks stupid. Just, do you know what I mean? Just a little subtle twist, where you cranked up reality just a little bit. And, those kinds of things would display the variety of things that you can do. And if you haven't done those things, well, fucking do them. That's what you should be spending your time in, rather than trying to, hammer a square peg into a round hole. I think it's very important to get a nice variety of work undergo.
If you have trouble with noses, sculpt a bunch of noses. If you have trouble with ears, work on your ears. Get yourself out of that comfort zone.
And they could just be latex and plaster molds, latex noses, and stick them on. They're just for stills, so they don't have to move particularly well. But if you can make a beautiful latex nose, you'll be able to display enough competence that someone would trust you with, other things, I think, because, sometimes you just can't afford those expensive materials. But if you don't make anything because you can't get your hands on epoxy, that's not going to impress anybody. Because the thing is, whoever you're trying to get a job off started from nothing and spent a lot of the time, trying to make stuff work with whatever they had. And so they spot that in other people. So if that's not you, well, it kind of shouldn't be there, because that position deserves to be going to somebody that does get off their ass and try.
And if you don't, I don't know how to do that. Well, it's, the internet is a wonderful thing when used for good. You can find out how to do anything.
Yeah.
I know this guy that wrote 3 editions of a book. Get your hands on that and do some research. The information's out there.
Yeah, you just got to go and get it, and then act on it. That's the thing. It's not good enough just to read it. You've actually got to put it into action.
Got to do it.
Yeah, it's all about doing. So that's it. So yeah, get in touch with the people. Step 2 is once you've got your folio together, I think it's really important to get in touch with the people who hired. Try and get in front of them with your folio. I think trade shows are very good for this. Things like IMATS, Monsterpalooza, the prosthetics event. Go to where these places are, because those companies will be there. Those people will be there. You can go up to them and meet them. Get a photo with them so you can show them that you met them in future correspondence. You know what I mean? Get a feeling for what they're like as people, and speak to a lot of people there. And you might go somewhere like, that has schools, speak to some of the ex-students, get a feel for the kind of people that already do this, and see if there's like a common thread, amongst them, because you'll often see that. I think, there's often a lot of traits that are shared amongst that kind of people. They've all got a kind of scrappy kind of eagerness to them about that you might not get, if you're only surrounded by people that work a regular job, because there's a certain edge about freelancing that, like, what's going on at the moment, everything in lockdown. There's a few people I've spoken to, like, they're not working. They're kind of like the rest of us, kind of scratching around trying to get bits and bobs and worrying about how they're going to pay the bills. But a lot of them are saying it's a lot like just another crappy year as a freelancer, which is not necessarily something you've ever had if you've always had a paid job where you had a regular check coming in. So it's kind of like, there's a certain kind of wild-eyed look to people that have never known certainty. And when you see them at the trade shows, they are a little bit kind of, not case hardened, but they're just, when they're a little bit less fretful about things going wrong sometimes, because not necessarily this, I'm not talking about this lockdown, but I'm just saying there's a certain, it's not the same as people that don't have to worry about where their checks are coming from. Whereas with freelancers, they're always worried a little bit, to the point where, you just don't want to go on
Which
holiday.
is why you
because-
always want to be, if freelancing is where you want to be, you don't want to get struck down by the man. You know, you've got to always be up in your game. You've got to always be at the top of your game and constantly improving, because it's survival of the fittest.
It's a tough one. That it's there was an expression, I can't think who to ascribe this to, but they said the expression was, if you're not busy working hard on your own dream, then you'll end up working hard on somebody else's. And it's true. It's like, and the freelance world is like that. You could be an entrepreneur, like where you could start a business and, have employees and all that kind of stuff maybe. But the vast majority of us are freelancers. We work for other people. So not everyone's got that in them to be like an entrepreneur. I know I don't. I'm not going to have a company with 50 people working for me. I don't think that's not how I'm wired. But it's definitely worth going to trade shows to try and get a feel for what people who do this already, what they like. Go speak to them, and often you will learn things, not so much the things they tell you, but the things you will observe about them and the way they work. That's why it's great to watch them do demos. It's lovely going to trade shows because you get to watch people, who do this for a living doing their job. And
it's also a great opportunity when you can get FaceTime with somebody whose work you admire and you want to emulate, and show them your portfolio and ask them, what can I do to improve this?
Yeah.
And then you go away and follow through with the suggestions that they gave you on how to improve your work and show it to them again. You've just made some brownie points.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. I think you need to sort of, a lot of people make the mistake of like starting the relationship, and it needs to be a relationship. They start the relationship by just asking, have you got a job? You know what I mean? It's like the first thing they ask. And it's like, you're better off, your first point of contact, your first start of the relationship should be, I have a thing that I want to fit. You want to come across as someone, look, I am trying to achieve this goal. I have already come this far. I've hit this roadblock. Could you please help me or advise me or point me in the right direction where you think I might go to solve that? And then act on that information. Whereas if somebody says, just solve my problem for me wholesale, that's just smacks of laziness and do you know what I mean? So if you're the kind of person that
one will get you a job and one will not.
No, exactly. If you can like rock up and say, look, I've already tried this stuff. This didn't work. And here's all my crappy things I tried. Look at them. You got pages of all your attempts. And here's my tests of these different materials. And none of them are working, or that I've tried these things. I'm much more likely to give my time to someone like that because I can already see that they put hours into this and they care about it. If somebody just says, oh, I really want to do this, but they've no evidence of it whatsoever, that doesn't, it smells bad. You can see it a mile off. And so it's good to go to trade shows, partly so that you can meet the people who might hire you, but also you get to meet people who are hired by people, and you can ask them questions and sort of see how you measure up against that. And it can be scary when you go somewhere like Montepalooza and you see the best work, because people put their best work out, and that's not how people are all the time. But it's good to go.
But they're all
like
approachable.
Yeah, they are.
Everybody there is approachable.
Yeah, and they do love what
as long as you're not a dick, they're more than happy to talk to you.
Yeah,
and offer advice on how to improve and get your foot in the door.
Yeah,
take advantage of that. Don't just walk around and be a moving wallflower.
No, it's true. And you got to be like there was one thing I think is worth mentioning is that obviously, a portfolio can be viewed online, but you and your work are two different things. And someone who's going to pay you to do stuff, they want to see you as well as your work. So don't just assume that sending somebody a link is going to be like, well, I sent them a link. It's like, no, they want to, you really want to try and get in front of somebody, because it's not, you are not separate from your talents. You know what I mean? So if someone's going to hire you, they need to know what you're like as well. So, and also your geographical location. We mentioned this before, if you live miles and miles away from work, where the work is, it's something an employer may take into consideration if you need a week's notice, because you've got to figure out where you're going to live first. And somebody else is like, well, I live 10 minutes around the corner. It's like, well, I'm going to hire the guy who lives 10 minutes around the corner, because I don't want the fact that you may have problems with sofa you're bunking down on to be the thing that means you can't get this job done. Do you know what I mean? It's it could be a thing, so just bear that in mind. But there's no way to game the system. You can't trick. There's no secret back door or anything. You know, it's a relatively small industry full of very enthusiastic individuals, and the best way to get work is to be good, be pleasant, and to be proactive and be persistent, but without irritating. And the last thing I was going to say about that is maintaining a professional social media status. I think is important. If you're the sort of person that runs to the keyboard every time something happens to you, and you have like extensive posts about how shit your life is, and that's all you throw up there, as somebody that might hire you, I'm going to think, shit, what happens if I say, shit, something's gone wrong, we need to work the weekend? Are you just going to be online slagging me off when my back's... Do you know what I mean? So think about how you come across, because, and we all know people like that, you know what I mean? So,
yeah,
but
no,
you know,
you just don't want to be one of them.
No, don't be one of them, because you got to think about it from an employee's point of view. And the last question, number 5, a big one. We like this question.
Will computers take over the work of makeup artists? No.
Well, it's a common question to ask. I think it's a very sensible one.
Yeah, it is. It is, and one that keeps people up at night. CG is getting really, really good.
Yes, it is. In some ways, CG has taken over a lot of stuff already. It's become incredibly sophisticated, but in addition to that, it's not cheap, nor is it easily done.
No.
You know, computers are still just a tool. I mean, the amount of times I've heard people say, oh, they just use a computer for that. It's like, you watch a CG department, you watch the visual effects people, they work hard. And there's
that's I spent years doing CGI before I said goodbye to it in favor of practical effects, because I'm a tactile person, and you can't hold what you're doing in the computer.
No.
I mean, in a sense you can now with 3D printing, but CG it's different, and it's more expensive than it's more expensive than animatronics. It's more expensive than makeup effects. We'll just do it in the computer. Because you can do it with CGI doesn't mean you should.
Well, I think it's just worth pointing out, there is a good CGI.
There are reasons
bad
to use it,
just like there's good makeups and bad makeups. And like you pointed out, the computer's just an economizer. It doesn't actually do the work. It just makes it easier sometimes.
Yeah. But it's only as good as the operator. It's just a tool.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, CG and makeup, they're just different tools basically trying to do the same thing. They're trying to create realistic illusions in the best way possible. And sometimes it makes sense financially and practically to do it as a makeup, but other times it might be better to do CG. Like, if you want something 50-foot tall running around on fire, maybe you don't build something that big practically. It makes sense to do something small.
Or if your entire story takes place in space, it's going to be cheaper to use CGI and some practical sets rather than going to space and doing your show, because that's impractical and enormously costly.
Yeah. Well, the thing I think is the thing to be aware of, and having been on shows where there's been a heavy CG presence on stuff like Game of Thrones and things, when you do a makeup effect on there, when often there'll be like a collaboration between, like, say for example, someone gets their throat torn out, there might be a practical element that you do, and then there's a digital element in that maybe they need to extend the blade or something, so you can swipe. Often they just use like a handle, and then for the 5 frames you'll see it, they'll put a blade in afterwards because it's the safest way of doing something, without risking the performers. But there's so many other things in that scene that are going to be digital. There's grading, there's sky color changes. They're maybe going to extend the set, all this kind of stuff. There's so much CG in everything. They're not really looking for more things to do. So if they don't have to fix your edge, that's a good thing. Do you know what I mean? And that's happened on set where they're like, oh, I don't need to worry about where this is going. Oh, that's great. Oh, that looks fine. And do you know what I mean? So they're not looking to do more stuff. It's a weird thing that CG is everything that's on the screen. You know what I mean? Anything you see with your eyes, it might be replacing a bit of costume, it might be fixing a bit of set, it might be changing makeup or hair or a prop or whatever. Those are all different departments that all could come under the the big umbrella of CG. So all of those need to be filled with, and you will get specialists. You get fabric and liquid specialists and all kinds of stuff. So it makes sense to still be competent at what you do, and maybe even start thinking about how you could use digital elements yourself in what you do.
Well, I think that's really what the trend seems to be, or where the industry seems to be heading is shops that are doing practical effects are starting to do digital effects as well under the same roof, which makes total sense because it's all one-stop shopping. Everybody's there. They all speak the same language. They're not having to send stuff out across town to a shop to do their bit and then send things back. Todd Masters is doing it. I think Spectral Motion and ADI all have in-house CGI departments now, as well as their practical and animatronic stuff. So it just seems to make more sense, because when practical effects and digital effects can work together, because the goal is to create. You're all working toward the same goals.
Ultimately, you want the effect to look real, right?
To tell a beautiful story, and to not have something on screen take you out of the moment, take you out of the reality of the storytelling. So, when they work in tandem to make the end product better, that's the goal.
Yes, I think it's true. I also think it's worth people who work practically to involve themselves in digital work in some degree. Like, for example, I think if you do makeup, you should use Photoshop. I think you should know how to use Photoshop. If you can't afford Photoshop, or you can't get Photoshop, there's free programs. There's one called GIMP, GIMP. Again, I'll put the link to that in the show notes. It's an image editing software, but it's open source, so it's free.
From a design standpoint, if you're designing a makeup, you want to do your own form of pre-visualization.
Yeah.
So you get a headshot of the actor, and if you need to, change the nose or change the cheekbones, change as simple as changing eye color, you can do all kinds of image manipulation with software to, if you want to do lizard skin on the actor's face. There are and there's there are tutorials on how to do all of this stuff, easily found on YouTube and through even some of the Adobe forums on how to do this.
Yeah, I mean, digital sculpting as well. Things like ZBrush, which seems to be the industry standard. I know there's one called Mudbox that Autodesk make.
Yeah.
Is it Autodesk that make Mudbox? But
yes.
ZBrush by Pixelogic seems to be the one. Again, that's a paid piece of software. But there's one called Sculptress, which is free. It's basically the gateway drug to ZBrush, but it is free. But,
I think it's made by Pixelogic, isn't it?
I don't think they made it originally, but they now own it. So it's on their website. But again, we'll put the link to that on there, and that's a free package, and it's worth just playing with these things so you can. I mean, one of the things I think about, like with makeup, it's similar to like what they do. I've tried to look. I was looking over at my bookshelf to try and see if I can find this book that I've got here. It's basically a book about photo retouching.
Yeah, well, I know Pixelogic is, with everybody on house arrest, sheltering at home right now. They've got free extended trials of ZBrush that you can download and have full access to everything.
Which is good, but
ZBrush 2020.
My only issue with that is if you've only got it for like a month or 2 months, you're going to hate the interface because there's so many options. So you might be worth getting Sculptress first.
Sure.
Kind of cut your teeth on that first, and then when you feel a little bit more comfortable with Sculptress, then press the button on your trial package with ZBrush. Because, but yeah, it's actually much more straightforward than you think. But it's worth.
And there's another software called Blender, which is kind of an organic sculpting.
Blender.
And I think Blender's free also.
Yeah, that's a good point. Open source, yeah. And Maya as well, which is not something I've used. Maya, how do you pronounce that?
Yeah, Maya.
Maya.
It's a more robust. You can do some of the organic sculpting and modeling in Maya that you can in ZBrush. Maya's more for character rigging and actually doing the animation and rendering. But if you want to up your salability factor, learn ZBrush, learn Maya, become a CG expert as well as a practical expert. Then if you can, the more hats you can wear well, the more attractive you're going to make yourself to employers.
I think the thing about using stuff like Photoshop and ZBrush, they are pieces of software, but that shouldn't be in itself a distraction any more than if you're going to draw something, whether it's a pen or a pencil. You don't really worry about the type of pencil or the color of the pen, because that's less relevant than what you're going to do with it. And you need to get comfortable enough with them that you stop thinking about it. Like the first week you had an iPhone, probably people were very distracted by the fact it was an iPhone. Whereas now you just use it to do what you need to do. You send text messages with it. You don't marvel at the fact that you can send text messages using satellites to transmit around the world. You know what I mean?
Good
Even though
analogy.
you should, but people don't.
Yeah.
They just use their phone to say what they want to say, whether it's to order a takeaway or call someone a twat. Do you know what I mean? So that's what they'll use this amazing technology for. So do you know what I mean?
Calling a twat?
So it's like you get so used to the device that you don't really notice it anymore. Instead, you are focusing on what you want to do with the device rather than what it's capable of. And it should be like that with the software. If you're distracted by the interface, then it's just because you're not familiar enough with it to not notice it anymore. If you don't believe me, watch an 18-month-old try and write their name with a pen, and then you do it, and it's like, it's fine. You know what I mean? Because it's so well rehearsed and well practiced, you don't think about it. You just write what you want to say, and it should be like that with software. And there is a bit of a divide that people have decided that they're practical, and others have decided they're digital. But I think at the core there isn't a divide. There's only a divide if you want there to be. There's nothing to stop you designing
like,
hair in Photoshop.
Are you Mac or PC?
Yeah.
Yeah, I said, I'm a Macintosh person. I said, them's fighting words. Put them up. you know,
So it's just
just a machine.
have a little play. And After Effects, I'm having a lot of fun with After Effects. That's good.
I love After Effects.
But I think it's worth incorporating the digital elements into your practical. And it's a taper. It's not like a cutting off. It's not like, once you started sculpting in ZBrush, that's it. You can never touch clay again. Do both. I mean, just do both. I found that what ZBrush does for me is it reveals to me how bad a sculptor I am much quicker than clay, because I don't have to fuck around with armatures and wrapping it up in plastic afterwards. It's just like, it's just the sculpt. You find out you can't sculpt a shoulder very quickly because you don't know what a shoulder looks like. So it reveals your weaknesses, and that's not a fault of the software. That's a good thing. So it can make you a better artist, I think, because you can focus on the pure sculpture of it. And you watch, I keep banging on about him, but the Chris Costa stuff, Theandropus, I always get his name. Oh my
God.
His stuff on Instagram, that's how you use ZBrush, and he's so generous. He shows you how to do it, and it all boils down to graft. It's hard work. It's like anything. All the best sculptors I know, they just sculpt a lot, whether it's in clay or on a Cintiq. It's the same thing. It's just effort. It's just putting in the hours. So if you can't afford to buy some software, get Sculptress and get GIMP and start playing, or Blender, and just start with the tutorials and do it alongside all the other training you would do. Just make it part of your training, because it's worth doing. And there's not many places showing digital sculpting. Like, no one goes to a makeup school. There's a few. I mean, I know they do at Cinema Makeup School.
Yeah,
but
Rod Maxwell teaches the ZBrush class there.
And that's great. But there's not a lot of places that do that, because nobody thinks about it in the whole. As a big picture. People are focused on just makeup or just hair or just this or just that, and I think you need to step back a bit and go, I could
become well-rounded.
Yeah, I could design something in Photoshop and then make it real. And that's what I was saying about the retouching. If you have like magazine, retouches digitally, they're doing things with Photoshop, but what they're doing is, it's the same intention as a makeup artist. They're trying, the more often than not, they're trying to present, a certain look, and that might involve making the eyes wider or the lips fuller or the neck longer, or whatever it is that you may all disagree with or whatever. But the point is they're altering the physical reality in order to convey a desired outcome, which is not what the real thing has. And you might do that with foundation. You might do that with hair extensions. You might do that with heels. You might do that with all kinds of things. Or you might have compression clothing that pulls stuff in and pushes stuff out in different places. It's the same stuff. It's all just lies. Do you know what I mean? But it's all about where you put those. It's the decisions that you're making that make it a good or a bad job. And I think I think a lot of photo retouchers think like makeup artists, and it's worth, I'm trying to find this book. I'll have to see if I can find it, put it in the show notes, but I would look up some photo retouching tutorials on Photoshop and just see how it's done, because they tend to approach it in the same way that makeup artists do. It's the same kind of thought process. So you could definitely design makeups in Photoshop and then push things.
What it was developed for is for photo retouching. Which just, before the software, you had to do it the old-fashioned way with dry brushes and actual airbrushing, which that's how I learned to do it in the 70s.
An actual cut and paste with a scalpel and paste.
Yep. And using friskets to mask things out.
And bromides. Do you remember bromides?
Yeah.
That was the old printing process. They're crazy. But yeah, I think it's well worth learning. Basically, overall, there's a lot more effects happening nowadays. There's a lot of digital stuff, but that doesn't mean that there's less makeup stuff. It might mean that things that before were only done practically are being done digitally now because it's possible. But that doesn't mean that there are not also a lot of makeup effects too. Basically, there's just more effects generally, I think, nowadays. There's a lot more visual effects stuff happening. And, there have been some massive departments over the last 10 years.
The pipelines are just getting more efficient and streamlined, making it easier to do more effects work.
Yeah. There's just a lot more of it. It's crazy. I mean, we've been being told for 20 years that, there was going to be no practical effects. And it's like, but the practical effect shops are massive. there's a lot going on.
Don't seem to have lessened.
No, I mean, there are times where you kind of hear things that were going to be in effect have gone, but you've still had,
like cats.
Yes, but that didn't necessarily work. But even if that's, you've got stuff like, Toy Story, which is entirely digital, but they still make films with actors. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't mean the existence of one prevents the other from existing.
It's not a digital voice.
No, you can get both. So you can have both things going. And I think that the thing is to start using technology in your practical world, like with sculpting, 3D printing, all that kind of stuff. But also the other thing is that just as we've assimilated digital technology into our lives, I mean, most people didn't use a keyboard every day 50 years ago. And now we do. I couldn't get through my day without having to type stuff. So you can embrace it and make it part of your life as well and gradually work towards it. And I think a practical person that understands and can use some digital stuff is far more useful than someone that folds their arms and refuses to pick up a mouse. And it's foolish as well, because I love fucking.
No, I agree with you completely.
The amount of stuff. I mean, when I design all the booklets and stuff, I'm using InDesign, which is a digital publishing software. That's taken me about 8 years to kind of master, but I've enjoyed using it every time I fire it up. I'm now using Audition to edit the podcast, and I love it. And it's making my life easier. And do you know what I mean? It's just I have more things I can do with it now, and the more familiar with it you become, the less you notice it as a thing to stop you from getting on. Instead, you start working with it, and it's just a case of.
But that familiarity, that comfort only comes from repetition, from doing it over and over again.
Yes.
So that it becomes rote.
Yes.
It becomes part of how you operate.
Yeah, man. It's all good.
It only happens from doing it.
As you put together, practical and digital effects, they're greater than the sum of their two parts.
Yep. Absolutely.
And
synergy.
And the computer doesn't just do it. You've got to make it happen. It's still your creative choices. And I think that's what a lot of people mistake. They think they press a button, the computer just does it all, and it fucking doesn't.
Yeah, no. If you don't, if you draw like a 4-year-old, the computer is going to draw like a 4-year-old.
Yeah, and 4-year-old computers are crap. Oh, I think we should wrap that up. That's been 1 hour, 47 minutes of us just gassing on.
Wow.
That was awesome,
Yeah.
though.
Well, it was fun.
That was really good. We've got some news. You can leave a voice message on our website now. If you go to battleswithbitsofrubber.com, we have a SpeakPipe app in there now. So you'll see on the right-hand side a little button you can click where it says leave a voice message, or you can go to the leave a message tab on the top. And there's basically a button that you press. And so long as you've got a microphone available, which if you're using a phone or a laptop, you will, or a tablet, you can just leave us a message right there, a voice message, and we'll get it.
If you want to tell us to sod off,
Yeah.
you can do that as well.
Yeah, you can. And it would
I
be
hope
lovely.
you don't, though.
No, it would be lovely. So I'd love it if people called in with their questions. We've had quite a few emails, which is lovely. And I kind of wanted to email back saying, could you do this as a voice message so I can play it on the podcast? But
Questions, suggestions for topics for podcasts. If you got a good dirty joke you want to share,
yeah,
you can leave a message up to 5 minutes long.
that'd be great.
Right?
Absolutely, which is plenty of time. But I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
we would love it if you could just, come get in touch with the show, Stuart and Todd at gmail.com. But if you want to leave us a voice message, like I say, go to our website, battleswithbitsofrubber.com, and you'll see there, the message tab on the right, and you can just click on it and leave us a voice message. And if you want, we can play it on the show and go into depth on the question. But that'd be great.
If you want to record us a new intro
That'd be fun.
with a funny voice,
That'd be great. Why do we
Give
do
it a
that?
go.
Then we could have different intros every week.
that would be great.
It's a fucking great idea.
Yes, please.
The more weird, the better. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we figured
All right.
we do a lot of time. We spend a lot of time talking to you guys, and it'd be lovely if you can talk back. So we thought we'd make it really easy for you to do it. So it's free to use. Just go ahead and do that. That'd be great.
Lovely chatting with you, Stuart.
Yes, sir. Sorry, waffling off for nearly 2 hours. I'm going to go and get myself a nice big Jack Daniels now. It's late in the evening.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, I think it's not that late here, but heck, I'm not going anywhere, so the drinking lamp may as well get lit.
Okay, man.
Talk to you soon.
Take care, buddy.